world's many wonders. Some hold their beauty in color and complexity, others in structure or in their inhabitants. Without it, these inhabitants would not be able to survive, provide, and maintain a stable food chain within the oceans. So, what happens when this awe-inspiring system is disrupted? This happens. Entire ecosystems stressed and destroyed. That same coral that was once admired for its beauty, now reduced to a bleached, dead forest. Hi, my name is Elsa Block, and I will be presenting on coral bleaching and ocean acidification. Many issues have arisen due to climate change. Temperature and sea level rise being the two placed at the forefront of them all. Two issues that are not nearly talked about enough, however, are coral bleaching and ocean acidification. Since the Industrial Revolution, the ocean has absorbed immense amounts of carbon dioxide emitted by humans and machinery, which has caused a constant increase in ocean acidity. Similarly, temperature increase and various forms of pollution have caused coral to become stressed and therefore bleached, causing a rapid decline in the number of coral reefs and healthy marine life habitat. Because these issues are happening out of sight, for many they've been placed out of mind. Here, I hope to educate as many people as I can about coral bleaching and ocean acidification and provide you all with strategies and ways to really make a difference, even if it doesn't seem like one individual can. So let's talk about coral. Many people believe that coral is just one individual being, some not even knowing that coral itself is alive. Coral belongs to a family of invertebrates, a phylum called Cnidaria, which includes sea anemones and jellyfish. In order to create what we believe is coral, each individual animal, known as a polyp, which is one of these, buds or creates hundreds of thousands of copies of itself until it's created one colony of genetically identical polyps. Coral have evolved between the last 2 and 300 million years, but perhaps the most interesting development throughout that time has been their symbiosis with algae. In order to survive, the algae and the polyps share space, function, and nutrients. The algae within each polyp is what gives coral its color. Some coral has been found that lived up to 4,000 years. Most only live to a few hundred. Coral reefs, however, are usually between 5 and 10,000 years old. Despite all this strength from thousands of years, an entire reef can be wiped out by one bleaching event. Bleaching occurs when coral becomes stressed through causes such as change in ocean temperature, acidity, or deprivation of nutrients. When coral becomes stressed, it's been known to expel the algae living within each polyp, causing it to become colorless, and why it's called bleaching. So, because once the algae no longer lives within the polyp, it takes much more energy for the coral to provide for themselves, to absorb nutrients and survive in general. Thus, bleaching events usually leads to the death of the coral reef. Once the coral has died off, the species dependent on it for survival are forced to either find a new place to live or die off themselves, causing an ecosystem as beautiful as this one become a barren forest, such as this. Take that in for a minute. Some of the causes that I said before, temperature and acidity change or deprivation of nutrients, are the three that are most known to cause bleaching events. But there's one that is not talked about nearly as much as the others. Have you ever walked by a tide pool or a pond and seen an overwhelming amount of lime green filling the surface? Have you ever tried to walk along beach rocks and slipped on that slimy plant at your feet? Although not all of these experiences may have been related to algal blooms, I'm sure you all have witnessed the peak of one within your lifetime, whether or not you knew it. The cause of algal blooms is well known, and yet again, completely our fault. They're caused by excess amounts of nitrogen and phosphorus, two things commonly found in fertilizers, pesticides, and other landscaping products that are then washed away into the nearby water bodies and oceans. One study found, I believe in the Gulf, it said in the Gulf of Oman, that after one algal bloom, the biodiversity or variety of species in that area decreased by an average of 70%. And 82% of the most abundant species in that reef either vanished completely or had a significantly reduced population. Coral, however, was hit the hardest. 95% of the coral in that reef was bleached and killed. You might think that this takes a long time to happen because all it is some green stuff on the surface of the ocean. But all of this happened within a span of 3 weeks. 21 days, and an entire ecosystem is destroyed. This happens because once the algae spreads, it starves the coral of oxygen, nutrients, and sunlight, which decreases the biodiversity. Biodiversity is incredibly important to every ecosystem because it ensures that after any disaster, life will remain. Coral itself is beautiful, important, and worth protecting for itself. But perhaps the most important reason to preserve it is what depends on it. Fish, lobsters, seahorses, sea turtles, beautiful sea slugs, clams, and countless amounts of other species depend on coral for their survival. On a much more selfish level, each year that coral continues to provide and contribute to human economy, it's said to be worth over $150 billion. And around 1 billion people around the world depend on coral reefs, seafood, for food. These species, coral, and countless others depend on stable ocean acidity to survive. For the last 300 million years, the acidity of the ocean has remained around 8.2. Today, however, it's decreased to 8.1. This may seem like an insignificant difference, but that represents a 30% change and increase in the ocean acidity over the last 2 centuries. Excuse me. This is a consequence of excess CO2 in our atmosphere. Like I said before, the ocean absorbs immense amounts of it. Almost 1/4 of the carbon dioxide emitted by humans since the Industrial Revolution has been absorbed by humans. That means around 525 billion tons of carbon dioxide within our atmosphere has gone into our oceans. This was initially seen as a great way to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, but scientists soon discovered that this was contributing and the cause of the fastest change in ocean chemistry and increase in acidity in the last 50 million years. This is the shell of a sea butterfly, put in seawater with increased acidity. Over a period of only 45 days, you can see that the shell has almost completely dissolved, lost its function, shape, has no purpose. Imagine if a creature was living inside of that. It would certainly be dead. As I'm sure we all know, every species, no matter how small, is crucial to every individual ecosystem that they live in. Could we even think about the effect that it would have if these species that depend on a safe ocean acidity to grow and maintain their shells died off? Can you even begin to think about what would happen as each tier of the food chain was hurt? It would affect not only marine ecosystems, but our own. All of the ocean's most intriguing and beautiful species would be in danger. A world without these species is not a world I want to live in, nor is it a world I want to leave to be fixed by future generations once we've destroyed it. Now, this may seem like a lost cause, but there is honestly still hope. Coral is strong and can grow and fight back algae if given enough time and stable conditions. So, people are trying. Large organizations such as the World Wildlife Fund are working to create coral planting and monitoring programs where certified divers, snorkelers, and anybody can have a hands-on experience that really makes a difference. But perhaps the most significant thing being done to help this cause is the education of tourists, locals, and activists that really have an ability to make a difference within their communities. Unfortunately, however, these efforts are on much larger scales, levels that we as high school students at Rocky Hill, smallest state in America, don't really have the opportunity to contribute to. So I know I've been up here throwing out seemingly hopeless facts, but what I really want you all to take away from this is that yes, coral reefs are struggling. Fish and countless other marine species are in danger, and it is primarily, if not completely, our fault. But what so few really take time to recognize is that we can actually do something about this. Of course, some of it must come from legislation and global conversation, but so much can stem from our personal lives. We can really have a huge impact. Simply by reducing your harmful chemical use, such as sunscreens, fertilizers, pesticides, and purchasing products that are Project Land and Sea certified, an organization that tests products for chemicals that are harmful to marine ecosystems and coral reefs, is a great place to start. I know you've probably heard this thousands of times in your life, and I apologize for saying it again, but using reusable water bottles and reducing your use of plastic is huge. Plastic, when dumped into the ocean, clings to coral reefs, and whichever coral it touches, it either sickens or kills. It allows bacteria to grow in that area, causing a huge, which is destructive for the coral reef around it and what it actually is touching. Corals that have plastic of any sort lodged in them are actually 20 times more susceptible to disease than preserved and healthy coral. So, because of this, simply having and using a recycling bin, keeping your non-compostable plastic out of the oceans is huge. Can you imagine a time where there's so much plastic used, wasted, and dumped that there's more plastic in the ocean than fish? Could you even begin to think of how devastating that would be to marine ecosystems as well as our own? Well, in 30 years, you won't have to imagine it. It's projected that by 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish. 2050. In order to help prevent this from happening, you can do things such as support reef-friendly businesses that are trying to make a difference. Whether it's a cause you donate to, products you buy that are Project Land and Sea certified, or cleanups you volunteer at, reef cleanups, beach cleanups, anything you can do. If you, people you know, friends, family, dive or snorkel, practice safe and responsible diving. Follow all regulations that are put in place to preserve coral reefs and the species living around them to keep them safe. And finally, and another thing you can do is contact your local representatives. I know there are a lot of issues that might seem more important than this right now, but simply putting in a word that lets them know that you want them to help make a difference is huge. So I know we all can't vote quite yet, but by starting now to support groups that are trying to combat global warming and sea level rise, as well as sea temperature rise, and taking climate change seriously as an issue, once we are able to put our opinions on a ballot, we will really have the opportunity to make a change and show our government that these are problems that are very impactful to ecosystems around the world and that need to be solved. Coral reefs are struggling. Fish species, sea turtles, any species you can think of that lives in any body of water around the world are in danger. The effects of ocean acidity, sea level and temperature rise, plastic dumping, and everything that I've talked about today are harming marine life as we speak. But with your dedication and will, we can truly help make a difference. Thank you.